Back in episode 7 of season 2, we took this teak board off the deck with the intentions of rebuilding it as a foam and fiberglass piece that would serve basically the same function but with much less maintenance. As I have said many times, exterior wood is one of those things that's really cool when your friends have it, but very few people want it on their own boat. It's a labor of love, and we already have enough of that to deal with on the interior. After Phillip had some time to think about how he would be able to recreate the exact curve and other necessary measurements with foam and fiberglass, he overcame the engineer's proclivity to overthink things and remember the KISS policy. Keep it simple, stupid. And I will say Phillip's actually quite good at remembering that very important policy. He also realized that the leftover carbon fiber was basically the exact size to wrap around the board after we trimmed it so that it no longer met the deck at the bottom. So that's the TLDR version of how we got to this point in the project.
So this is the front. I don't really know exactly what to call it. Kind of like a breakwater on our boat. So these bolt holes are for where each connection point is to like the winch islands on our boat. And so this is in front of the mast. I think it really just keeps water like away from washing out lines and coming back. The one issue we had with it is this is matched to the deck and therefore it's sealed and collects water, and so then the bottom gets all discolored. It rots out. It doesn't rust, it's wood, and then that backed up water can also cause other damage because it's sitting on the deck, and if there's any other small leaks it can amplify or speed up the degradation of the sealants around the fastener. Originally I was thinking I would have to remake the whole thing, but upon closer inspection, the wood is all still solid in this, but the bottom edge is weathered because it's seen a lot of water and it has been varnished in the last probably a couple of years. And then even back here, like you can see the discoloration where it hasn't been varnished because it was behind the winch faces. And so I think our plan is we're just going to cut the bottom up about a ½ inch, and I think I'm going to cover all in carbon fiber, and the wood will be 100% sealed, and I won't have any varnish work really to do. I'll probably varnish the carbon fiber, but it's not going to be as prone, I think, to cracking as on top of bare wood.
Phillip got to hogging it down with a sander. There really is part of me that sees the beautiful grain structure on this piece of teak and wants to weep at the thought of covering it up. But anytime I see someone out with a heat gun scraping gooey varnish off with a putty knife, I feel a little bit better. Once the sanding was done, it was time to lay up the carbon fiber, and first Phillip wet the wood with some resin to make sure that there would be really good adhesion. And regular fiberglass would have been fine, we just would have faired and sanded it and painted it the same as the Dodger and the new hatch, but the carbon fiber just looks so cool, and it really accents the anodized mast, boom, and winch farm.
Alright, so I'm not sure how well everything will work for me, but part of the process is I'm trying to get this carbon fiber, which is 12 inches wide. I'm going to use pretty much all the width of it to wrap and have a really nice tight seam. That means I need to hold the ends down nice and tight and not have it pop back up. So I'm using 4-ounce glass, which is a lot lighter, thinner, to wrap all the way around and then seal it on the back side. And then when I wrap this, it's going to wrap, the 4-ounce will wrap all the way back the other way and then come and end and terminate on this front surface, and I'll sand And it'll be this beautiful carbon fiber weave that's seen and fully sealed. That's at least the goal. Realities are always different than goals. So it's fully glassed over with epoxy. So now it is fully sealed. I don't have to worry about it deteriorating further as long as I make sure any holes that I drill are backfilled with epoxy and then drill down through the epoxy. So I'm liking how it looks. I think it's going to be a really sharp looking piece of carbon fiber on the front of the boat. So this is the carbon fiber. It's got peel ply on it. So we're just going to pull the peel ply.
By the way, if you are doing any fiberglassing, peel ply is an excellent addition. It gives a fairly uniform surface and it makes sure that the blush develops on the top of the peel ply so that when you remove it and you're ready for your next coat of resin, you don't need to sand.
Alright, I do have a bit of sanding to do, but so this side is the side that will be visual. I do have two little voids. I might have to pop three. I have three little voids in the upper layer of glass. It would work. The corners need some attention, but some of that will get buried. The backside, outside corners look pretty good. So, alright, I've pulled the peel ply off and sanded any high spots because just the nature of it, there were some high spots. Popped or cut out any loose bubbles for the most part. There's actually one right here that I want to take care of. So the 2 layers of glass, it allows me to sand and not hit the carbon fiber weave, which will look pretty terrible if you hit that, because it'll get all fuzzy or just change the texture of it. So that allows me a little more leniency on how precisely I put down the carbon fiber and if there's any variation in that. So now I'm coming back through with just a little bit of epoxy. I'm going to fill any weaves or sanding cuts. I already wiped it all down with acetone, or in my case it's a special brush union thinner from Total Boat. It's very similar to acetone. Just has a little bit of a slower evaporation time. So I just want to make sure this epoxy is mixed well. And we're going to pour it on and then brush it on. So so with this, the goal is I don't want tons of epoxy, essentially just enough to fill everything, but not enough to pool a puddle. There's every little hairs out of the brush. I'm gonna make sure those get pulled out. So the first few passes are really heavy, and the goal is to just even out all the epoxy. So I've sanded and scuffed the whole surface with it. You can see here, like this is sanded, and it was brought down by a sander, so it's a high spot, and then like this was actually a lower spot right here. So then I scuffed it with a Scotch-Brite pad. And so yeah, it looked really nice yesterday before I sanded it, but the reality is like there's all sorts of like high and low spots on this. And so yeah, the sander brings down the high spots, and then you scuff it all up so that it adheres, and the next layer it levels it out even more. And so Heather was telling me, oh, it looks so nice, but the reality is like, yeah, there's more steps to make it look better than just that first coat. So this next coat of epoxy is thinner, and it will kind of fill in the low spots, adds a little bit to the high spots, and not as much to the low, with the light brush strokes. So yeah, that will help level it out, and I'm hoping after this I am ready to sand and varnish then. Alright, so hair dryers. There we go. They do have a use with epoxy work, and it pops, normally it pops any little micro surface bubbles, with hot air and a little bit of air movement, and you can blow on them, but it's just way easier to use a hair dryer. You just don't want to touch the hair dryer to the epoxy because it wrecks it, the hair dryer, or your work surface. So yeah. So here is the top, or the forward facing section of this. After it's dried and cured, so it looks really nice. Because this epoxy doesn't have UV stuff, so we'll sand and varnish it. And I'll give it the final protective coating. But so we got the forward facing side, so now the aft side we'll need to do. And so yeah, it's the next layer. So yeah, we've got to tape the edges and then apply the epoxy. This layer, applying the tape like right on the edge or just below the last tape line, so everything gets a full coat of epoxy. A couple little rips in it to relieve the tension.
The second coat of epoxy is basically the same as the first. Mix, pour, and brush. Then steal your mother's spare hair dryer and use it to pop any bubbles.
For fixing this piece back onto the boat, there was 5 1/4-20 bolts on each side that held it in. And so I filled the holes with thickened epoxy to some extent, mostly on the outside face, so the bottom face in this camera shot. And that was to keep stuff from like having pockets or voids. And I didn't do this side because it just, the holes are so small at that point that it's not really going to affect how the glass lays too much. So then it came back to how do you find and mark out the holes so you can re-drill them. And so what I used is I have a very bright headlamp. I actually held it underneath in a dark room, and I could actually see the light coming through. And then because it's a black surface, I used a silver Sharpie, and I marked the locations. And so these ones I could fully see. These ones I could just see a couple pinpoints of light coming through them. And so I marked them. So I'll just start with a small drill for these ones for sure. And we'll just drill out. And I decided to try, instead of doing just full thicken epoxy and then re-drilling down the center, which works, it just has never worked well for me. I just bought this is some carbon tube, and so the diameter of it will fit a bolt. So I'll just drill for this size and then epoxy this in to each of the holes, and then we'll give it a nice clean hole to run bolts through once we're ready to reinstall this. Alright, so I did put a little 1/8 inch pilot hole in every single spot I thought, and they all dropped in. So I know I'm in the right spot, so now I have a 1/4 inch drill bit. I'm going to drill through the glass. And so this is the size that they were. And they were flatheads. They weren't hex flatheads, they were just a flathead with a flat screwdriver. And they came up through, and they locked in, and the backside was countersunk for flathead. So instead I'm going to do button heads on the backside, so they will be visible, but it's a lot easier to put a bung in wood than carbon fiber and have everything look nice. And it'll also just eliminate exposed fasteners. So carbon tubes will now upsize to the correct size, then we can glass these in. I drilled from the backside so that they're coming through, and the end termination is in the right spot, because that's the most important part, because threads don't have much misalignment. So I'm going to step up a couple, at least 2 bit sizes in the middle, and that'll just help ensure it follows the same track. Should now fit, and they're a little proud on both sides. So I'll actually try to get them flush on the front face, and then the back I can come through and trim up, because it is going to be underneath and sandwiched in between some aluminum, so it doesn't matter as much, and we'll have to carefully trim up this front face. So I'll just tape it up when I go to sand. And I do have to do I will varnish all of this, so I will be putting another coat of finish on. So yeah, those look nice. Alright, so on the other side I already filled like the little chamfered edge with thickened epoxy, so on this side I'm just gonna smoosh, technical term, right? Thickened epoxy around the edge to make sure everything is fully kind of sealed and good, and then I can come back tomorrow or later this week and sand down these edges. So I don't know if these will be any better than just thickened epoxy. They might be more work, they might be less, I'm not sure. I think part of what sold me is when the bolt compresses, you've got like a full glass laminate all the way around that's now pushing on, instead of really just like the skin friction. And part of it is I don't really want to use some really big fender washers to lock this all together. Try to clean the majority of the thickened epoxy out. And then I can easily put a drill bit back down through and clean it up later. Alright, so you can see the carbon tubes are all glassed in. And there's some thickened epoxy, so I'm going to come back through and sand all the carbon tubes flat and the thickened epoxy off. I'll lightly sand everything else, and then I believe I'm ready for varnish. I've got my carbon tubes inset and sanded down. This is all buried, so I'm not worried about the look of the surface on this side as much, other than my own perfectionist self. So I am now going to varnish it, and that will give it the UV protection that it needs. So I'm using Total Boats, I think it's like Halicon Clear. I'm just going to pour a little bit into a cup and then brush it off. I'm hoping it all goes swimmingly. I did wipe everything down with essentially acetone to make sure that the surface is nice and clean without any dust or other particulates. Alright, so here's the breakwater piece. It's backlit, so it's not going to be easy to see the carbon fiber. But I'm hoping all the bolts line up. As I already pre-drilled all the tubes and holes.
Is there a chance you could nab my coffee? You're the best. Thanks. Is it a little cold?
Yeah. Yeah, the boat said it was 18 inside when I turned the space heater off.
It's a bit nippy.
Thanks for sunshine.
That's true. 18 degrees and sunglasses. There is hope. And the sun is pretty warm, all things considered.
And for the Ericsson 39 owner in
New Zealand where it's warm and sunny.
Here's snow on our deck.
This sucks.
Alright, so we have it fully installed. It's kind of hard to see the carbon fiber weave being backlit. But it looks quite nice, and there's the bolts on each end. There's the other drinking coffee. From this side, you can see the carbon fiber showing up in the sunlight.